everyone. This is Audrey Peck, your host of Asian Women for Health's podcast, From Resilience to Radiance. Each month, as you know, we amplify the voices of Asian women and change makers in our community who challenge the way we think about our health journeys, our capacity for resilience, and self-care. Today, we'll be looking at the impact of various traumas on our lives, as seen through the personal journey of my special guest, Lea Tran. Lea is a dynamic speaker, a published author of her own memoir, a transformation coach, and a fellow podcaster. She's also a devoted wife and mother to an adult son. Her personal journey, as you will soon hear, is a testament of strength and resilience in overcoming adversity. And she offers an inspiring voice of hope for anyone who may experience emotional or persistent trauma. Welcome, Lea.
Hi, Audrey.
I'm so delighted you could zoom in from sunny Florida to be with us today.
Well, thank you for having me here. I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
Absolutely. So where do we begin? Let's start with the title of your personal memoir. I Did Not Miss the Boat, Memoir of a Vietnam Hoa Refugee.
Yes. Well, you're the first one who actually pronounced Hoa right.
Oh, is that right?
A lot of people say it's Ho. I say, no, no, Ho.
Well, maybe for the benefit of our audience, why
Yes.
don't you explain what Hoa is?
Yes. And it's actually a very important word in my title because Hoa meaning ethnic Chinese that the Vietnamese call us Hoa people. So that's why it's not HOA, it's not Ho, but it's Hoa. I tell people it's spelled like, it sounds like moi in French, and this is Hoa.
Yes.
That's our typical labeling as Chinese ethnic in Vietnam.
Yes. And you grew up in Vietnam.
I was born and grew up in Vietnam.
Yes. So, well, I want everyone to read the book, but tell us how this moving personal memoir, because you share your harrowing journey across the, South China Sea. I'm sorry,
Yes.
Fleeing Vietnam during the war. How did this memoir come about, and what did you have in mind in telling your story now?
Okay, so it's a long answer, but I'm gonna try to sum it up as short as I could. The journey was about 42 years ago, and I don't know, are you young enough to remember that there's a big influx of mass exodus of Chinese people that fled out to the sea to look for freedom. And my family were one of those people who were called boat people because we escaped the country via the boat. And before all of that happened, South Vietnam, that's where I was born, and my dad left China to Vietnam when he was 3 years old. So he has a stacking trauma of his own, and he had made it to a place that's pretty comfortable economically and financially for his family. But when the communists took over in 1975, things have turned upside down. And not just our family, but a majority of the people in the country being hit as capitalism, and they being ransacked, their possession being confiscated. So there's many other reasons led to that mass exodus. So when we left Vietnam, obviously you have to have a boat, and my dad was building that boat underground for almost like a year. He has constructed a team, and he was the lead manager, and he had that boat secure, and it was like 502 people get on board on that boat, cramping like sardine. And I told that story, yes, in a 28-yard length and 28-meter length, 8-meter width on that boat. And we have like 2.5 decks. And we jam about 502 people on it. It's just like sardine. And I told a little bit of that story on my TEDx platform. So if people want to listen to a little bit of a journey, if you don't want to read the book, at least get familiar with the story on the TEDx, only 15 minutes. So we left Vietnam via the boat. So therefore the name's Boat People. And it's significant to me after many years of contemplating about my story, my message to the world, because I felt like we are underrepresented. Lots of Vietnamese people who talk about refugee from Vietnam, Vietnam refugee. But I felt like it's another layer of onion, like the Chinese in Vietnam had not really do a lot of justice on telling their side of the story. So it took me a long time to get to that courage to share the story, because it is not an easy one. You got to be vulnerable, you got to be out there, and you have to go through the period of what you have been through for that 40 some years in order to go back into the memory lane and pull out all the detail. And there's a lot of missing pieces. When I left Vietnam, I was 16. When I got to America, I was 17. So old enough to understand some of the things, but not old enough to understand everything all the much deeper level that I need to understand. So I had to do a lot of Google search. I have to do a lot of interviewing my family members, my mom, and go back into all the documents and look at everything. And the reason that I want to write this book, because I want to encouraging people to also share their story. Everybody has a journey, and especially a journey that is more historical. Is a piece of history that a lot of people don't get to learn from in school. This is the hard knock of life, and people have learned some of the history lessons through books. I really walked through the history through life experience, and I want to share that. What is it like to be a Chinese in Vietnam before war, during war, after the war, and how we actually struggle to assimilate to a brand new country where we couldn't speak the English, no possession, no money, no culture shocks. It's like everything all coming at once. But we have made it. Resilient have take us through that journey. And I want to tell people that no matter how hard their life, their challenges, they can pull through if and only if they decide that, they should believe in themselves. And it's a message of hope.
Yes. Lee, your ability to share your story, given, I can only imagine, a tremendous amount of change and uprooting, the uncertainty and trauma. I mean, there was a lot of post-traumatic stress among refugees. It was widely prevalent during that time. But your capacity to tell your story is so powerful, not only for the next generation, but even the current one, because hearing your personal narrative, I mean, nothing can replace that. Hearing it in your own voice.
So I think it's a necessity for people who've been through trauma to share, and it really takes a lot of I don't want to say bravery, but yes,
courage for sure.
Yes, you do. You do.
But on your own time, wouldn't you say?
Right. I mean, usually when I had this idea about telling my story, I guess for many years. And the reason I wrote down everything when I was young, in every part of my journey, I recorded. And I knew that someday I will have to refer that for some important things, maybe to tell my children or to leave, some sort of diary for my next generation. But I never thought that I am good enough to write a book or tell a story on stage. I never thought that my English would be sufficient enough to even make it credible as a speaker or as an author. So I put in the head of my mind, but even though many of my friends have said that I really want to see your movie on the screen, I was like, oh my God, let's go one step at a time. Let me get the story out into the book first. But that's the kind of beliefs that my friends has for me when they heard about bits and pieces of my story. And this story pretty much blown them away, because they say that I have known you for decades. I just had no idea that what kind of trauma you've been through. So when I was when I was writing, I joined a writing group, and one of the gentlemen in the group said something really interesting. He said that usually people with PTSD, with traumas like that, it takes them 40 years to get the story out. Like people, um, World War II veteran, Holocaust victims, and so. And I was like, wow, how do you know? Because this story is about 40 years old. So it makes sense. And he said, yeah, history have shown that studies show that usually it take people that long to sort of be able to get through that emotional ride, to share the story. So I thought it was really interesting when he made that observation.
Yes. And you don't do anything small because, this was like pre-social media. I mean, obviously the events of the war. And now you're a podcast host, not in addition to being an author. You're on two podcasts, your own, that's called From Surviving to Thriving. I catch a lot of it on Facebook. But then you also have a podcast with your son called
Yes,
Family
you really do your homework well.
I try.
I know. Well, thank you for mentioning that. None of those were planned. When I wrote the book, I just thought I'm just going to tell my story because my niece called me one day, a year before I wrote the book. And she said, I was reading some story. She's a journalism major and she reads a lot. And she was telling me the book that she read. And then she turned around and she said, how come we never talk about our family history at home? I don't know anything about grandma and her family or grandpa. I don't know this and I don't know that. So immediately I said, oh my God, thank you for validating the things that I want to do, because that's exactly what I want to do. I want to leave a legacy by telling our family story to you guys. So that pushed me a little bit. But then when I said that you can take part in it, when I write a book, you can be my editor. You can help me because you're good in English. You were born here. I am not. I've got tons of things that I need to learn. So she ended up with my one of my editor. But then when I finished my book and my son called me and he said, how come you asked Emily to be part of your book, but you didn't ask me?
Your only son. Your pride and joy.
Probably, yes. And I was like, wow, because usually you think men don't pay attention to this kind of detail. And I said, oh my God, you make me so happy. What would you like to do? You want to be an editor too? And he's like, no, I want to interview you on a podcast because there's so many things in this book that I read and I really appreciate it, but I want to dig deeper into your thought about what the journey is. I want to ask you a lot of personal questions. So hence that podcast called Family Roots was born. And the other podcast is Something a Fluke. When we had lockdown on 2020, about March, and a month prior to that, I have made an acquaintance with somebody who's also a refugee from Cambodia. So she was a survivor from the killing fields. So I had met her once, and during the COVID, I got really antsy. I got really restless, and PTSD is just like, I felt like I'm pacing at night. I couldn't sleep, and I was very antsy, and I want to do something. And I sew like 700 masks, to produce out for people who need it. Some people buy, some people I donate. And then I call my friend Sarah up one day, and I said, let's go on Facebook Live and just do something. Let's talk about our experience, how we have been through the unknown periods that people have not been through. Let's help people to get through this by listening to our story and, say that there's still hope. Don't worry, things gonna be better, blah, blah, blah. And we were on air every day, Monday through Friday for over 2 months. And then we're like, let's ask other people for their stories. So it's now over a year and 3 months that Facebook Live, and now we do Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday, and we feature only guests and listening to their thriving story. We call it, it's a thriving conversation, and I call S to T a thriving conversation. From surviving to thriving, a thriving conversation.
I know it's very complimentary to this podcast, From Resilience to
Yes.
Yes, but we focus a lot on health and wellness and people's women's, narratives,
Yeah,
amplifying their voices as well, because our stories are not told frequently
right,
enough.
right.
And
And I think the wellness part is so crucial when people have been through trauma and people have been through a lot of PTSD.
Mhm.
Um, physically take a toll and also mentally. And many of them had slumped into um, clinical depressions and not taking care of themselves. I want to see that the self-esteem and the self-worth part is totally destroyed when you going through so many things, that uncertainties, and you're not sure who you are, identity crisis. So all of those above contribute to a lot of wellness in you. And I can say that firsthand, I'm experiencing a lot of those things, and even up to now. And
Mhm.
I'm still refusing to go see psychiatrists or anybody, because I just feel like nobody can understand my situation because they have not been there. It could be
Mm.
totally wrong, but I felt like, because I'm into culture, so it's really hard for people to understand the mindset of an Eastern world, and they
Yes.
may not be able to help me in that sense.
Yes, there's actually a great need for practitioners and clinicians who either share, ethnic
Yes,
heritage and cultural understanding, or they themselves are
right.
of Asian descent.
But this kind of conversation is actually a healer. It's a healing process. And
Absolutely.
every time I have share my story, or every time I have talking about it, I think I get a little more healing. And
Mhm.
writing the book is a huge therapeutic. Help me understand where my parents come from, what circumstances we were in, and why we act the way we are now, and
Mhm.
even just appreciate them. And just like my son always say that, Mom, by interviewing you, I appreciate you more and understand why you are thinking the way that I used to resent it. And
Mm.
just like I used to resent
Wow.
my mom for certain things she does, you know, um,
Mhm. Not fully
simply,
understanding the context and your lived
right,
experience,
right,
right? And what
right.
we're serving as triggers, possibly. But, I mean, it impacts your being, but also the dynamics within the family, that intergenerational trauma that can be passed
Absolutely. And that open up that dialogue is so crucial,
on.
because
Right.
then you open up the door to see both way. It's like I feel like my generation got sandwiched in between the
Mhm.
older traditional more culture generation, and then the younger more contemporary,
Mhm.
and nobody talked to anybody deep in the
Mhm.
issue. You saw the surface talk.
Yeah.
So
No, for sure. And I think I just have to say and compliment you for your courage, but to share your story. But it's such a gift that you're giving to your son. I mean, I personally did not have that opportunity with my father, who has passed. He survived the Korean War and lost his parents during that time. And as an only child, he was always very
yeah,
protective of his
right.
only daughter. So, I never, everything I heard about his upbringing and during the war torn,
Right,
war torn country was
right,
passed down from my mom,
right. And
secondhand. Yeah.
and that too, the book is totally to honor my dad's legacy, because he passed away very young as well, and
Hmm.
we didn't have a good um closure in a sense, because I was young, he was young, and like I said, he'd been through a lot of trauma in his life. So communication was not something of the strength in my family.
Hmm.
And there's a lot of time I resent him. I love him, super powerful, he's my hero, but there's time I blame him for things. But writing this book totally opened up my whole entire vision, that he is totally my hero, and he's just not mine, but he's also have saved many lives. That
Hmm.
502 people on that boat,
I know.
he had played a major role to help people find that kind of freedom.
Yes. Thank you for sharing that. As far as resilience goes, because I know it's, the healing process, it continues, but it's been a process for many, many years, as you said. But right now, you seem to be in a very um, strong place, and open, sharing your story with the
Confident is
world.
something you exude. I think, everyone has in a while, sometimes you appear very confident, but there's a still moment of doubt when you stand in front of the mirror and you look at that, who's that girl? That imposter syndrome starts seeping in. And I'm relying a lot of prayers. I was like, when I feel like I am weak, I would ask the higher
Force.
divine,
Yeah.
to help me out, because I know that I want to, but it's not up to me. It's I'm hoping the Holy Spirit, the divine, that's going to guide me from there. But
Yeah.
I have to say that I opened the book, my memoir, with the phrase that many times people thought they saw me like a duck gliding on the pond, without a feather out of place, but underneath I was really paddling frantically just to be calm from the demeanor from outside. So yes, I would say that people look at me and say, oh, that's a perfect, refugee immigrant story, that she made it. But the struggle is real. The struggle, I think all of us are facing to ourselves every day. And we have to keep inspiring ourselves in order to be able to inspire other people.
Yes. And I was going to ask you, I'm glad you brought it up, your spiritual connection or faith. Does that tie in with your own cultural identity and heritage? Because I'm curious to know how your cultural identity has influenced your approach to wellness.
Right. So I was born in a Buddhist family. We are very faithful in the sense of, we have shrine, we have ceremony of all sort, but I lack the understanding of what is behind it. And funny that we're Buddhist, but my dad sent me to a Catholic education when I was young. So I got a lot of experience in the Christian world. And I went, when I came to America, I went to a Catholic high school, and I ended up in the Catholic university, marrying a Catholic man. But it took me a long time. I was resisting because I was keep telling me that I'm born Buddhist. I can't betray my parents' God, But it took. So I follow along to marry my husband. I was not Baptist until 5 years later. And I did not really believe in God himself until a trip to Rome. That's going to be in my book too. That's my spiritual book, and many other different aspects. But it took me a trip to Rome to validate my faith with God, and knowing that, he had loved me wholeheartedly and have drawn a path for me all my life. So so now I completely I said that I'm a Christian, I'm a Catholic.
Yes. I hear the emotion behind the strength in your faith. So, and for those who may not have a particular religion, if you believe in something bigger than yourself, you can always draw on it for healing.
Yeah.
Yes. As far as if you look over, if you look at your journey in its entirety, what has been the most surprising part of it for you? Or is there a surprising part?
Surprising part that I can actually connecting with the younger generation. The outcome was so rewarding. And also I'm surprised that so many people are interested in learning the story that I felt really humble. I felt was not worthy, but people have told me that I have helped them. They inspire them to write their own story, to tell their own, to reconnect with their own heritage, to communicate with their parents or their children. So that makes me really happy, because that's the whole purpose of writing my book, because it's not only helping me, but also helping a lot of refugees, immigrants, people who came to this country felt like they had lost. They didn't know who they were. And now I want to say that I am proud in my own skin. I am proud to be a former refugee. I didn't let that stigma kind of cling on to me and be ashamed of it, you know. So that's part of who I am. And
Yeah.
I'm proud of it.
That's at the core.
Yes.
You know, we're not defined by our trauma,
Right.
but it does shape us.
It does. It does.
Know?
And even the people who have done a lot of things, I mean, it's like we don't define by their mistake. I mean, it's you know, everybody make mistake, but they are not the mistake. We are not the mistake either. So
yes, that's such an important message. Well, I mean, I could speak with you forever, but you know, I'm going to invite everyone to check out your links on your website and your podcasts. But before we wrap up, I wanted to do just a quick round of rapid fire questions for fun.
Okay.
Indulge me. So since we were talking about movies, if a movie were made about your life, which I hope it will be, perhaps, who would play you?
Oh my God. You stumped me on that one because I don't watch a lot of movie and I have no idea who is the rising star of Asian. I'm not very good with names and faces. And I watched the last movie I watched is the Crazy Rich Asian.
Yes, yes.
And I'm sure there's a lot of great, I am dumbfounded.
Okay, I won't put you on the spot.
I wish I could tell you right now, but it's got to be petite. It's got to be
petite and beautiful and courageous.
Oh.
What is your favorite self-care ritual?
Take a power nap.
Power nap. Oh, yeah.
Yes. I mean, if I talk a lot on Zoom and I felt like I need to close my eyes before I see my next client, I'm laying down for 10 minutes and my alarm. Yes.
Yes. Your favorite holiday?
Christmas.
Okay. Now with lifting COVID restrictions, where would you most like to travel?
Home to Pennsylvania to see my family. And we're planning that trip soon. So I'm looking forward to it.
And out of curiosity, have you been back to Vietnam with your son? Or is that
No, my mom have been back like half a dozen times, but I want to save that trip. So I want to go with my husband and my son. And as he got older, it's a little harder to coordinate the schedule. And then COVID hit, you know, all this kind of thinking.
But on your itinerary, right?
Yes.
And lastly, if you could speak any language in the world, you know, take time out of the equation, resources, what language would you choose?
Français.
Français.
Yeah, we
romantic languages.
Français. I love French.
Yes, romantic languages.
Yes.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Lea, for inspiring us and supporting all of our listeners too, inviting them to share their stories and their journeys. But most importantly, thank you so much for standing strong in your truth. It's truly inspirational.
Well, thank you so much for the opportunity to share my story. And thank you so much for doing what you're doing, because I think, you know, the world really needs to get from resilient to radiance, because we all have that in us. And we just have to know where to shine it, you know, just let it shine.
That's right. So thank you so much. If you liked what you heard in this episode, be sure to check out the links to Lea's website and podcast, which we will have with her bio. And also check out her TEDx talk on YouTube to learn more about her journey from Vietnam. And for those, of course, who want to check out previous podcast episodes, be sure to go to our page on the Asian Women for Health website. And you can also leave a comment and tell us the topics that matter to you most. We are available on any platform of your podcast choice: Google, Apple Podcast, Stitcher, and SoundCloud. So until next time, as Lea said, strive for radiance, keep shining, and stay connected, because the world needs you.